Welcome to the Troubled Artists Podcast, Episode 9, T.L McCoy.
Welcome back to the Troubled Artists Podcast. Today I am here with T.L McCoy. T.L McCoy is the founder of Blue Round Book Group, LLC, and the author of Delilah versus the Ghastly Grimm, a magical middle-grade fantasy novel inspired by her real-life granddaughter who lives with a rare and life-threatening seizure disorder known as Dravet Syndrome. T.L. didn't set out to write a book. She set out to give children like her granddaughter a hero they could see themselves in. She brings warmth, purpose, honesty, and is passionate about disability representation in fiction, family storytelling, neurodiversity, and empowering children through inclusive literature. So T.L. McCoy, thank you for being on the show. So before we begin, I do like to ask this question. Tell us in your own words, who is T.L. McCoy?
So I like to think of myself as a writer. I recently released this book. It was released in May, so it hasn't been out that long. So foremost, I think of myself as a writer and as a grandmother, probably above all else, I'm a family person. So it is, as you said, I wrote a book for my grandchild who was diagnosed with a rare and sometimes catastrophic seizure disorder. And it was designed to be inclusive so that kids like her could feel empowered by the stories that they read. And I feel like it is a very important mission that I'm on right now as a writer. And I do art on the side too, but I actually had a professional illustrator do the cover of this particular book. So that's who I am. I'm really I'm a family person. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. I'm a writer. And for my day job, I'm also a psych nurse, which may seem very different, but there's actually a lot of overlap between the different roles.
Nice. That's great to hear. I am curious to learn more about this book, Delilah versus the Ghastly Grimm. So could you go into detail about what the book is and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. This is what it looks like. Delilah versus the Ghastly Grimm. It's a middle grade fantasy novel, and basically it features a young girl who has a life-threatening seizure disorder, and an incident at school kind of sparks a life-threatening seizure, and this particular seizure opens an indigo door in her mind, and she ends up being in two places at once. She's in the hospital due to the seizure, and the doctors do what's called a medical, they put her under a medically induced coma to stop the seizure because it's so serious. And then she's also in the fantasy world, Other Sphere, because the door opened and she stepped through. So that sent her, it catapulted her basically to this fantasy world. And she can't get out of that world because the door has closed on account of her being placed in a medically induced coma. So now she's trapped in this fantasy world, and there are monsters in the world. She has to go on a quest to find a book. She makes some new friends. It's a very exciting, action-packed book, sort of like what the adventure of maybe Percy Jackson meets Harry Potter for the magical elements. And of course, the main villain is the Ghastly Grimm. And what I tried to do with the book is present disability with an authentic feel to it. So she's a person who lives with a seizure disorder, but it doesn't really define her. And her powers in this fantasy realm are rooted in her disability. So basically, what some would consider her greatest weakness turns around and is really her greatest strength in this fantasy world. So that is kind of Delilah versus the Ghastly Grimm in a nutshell. It's a very exciting, action-packed book for middle grade kids. But I'm actually getting a lot of adult readers who are saying that they like the book, which I did not expect. It's doing quite well right now. It won 3 awards and it hit 3 different bestseller lists on Amazon, one of which is for children's epilepsy health. It actually hit #1 for children's epilepsy health, which was very exciting for me because it's a fantasy book, so you wouldn't think that that particular book could hit that category, #1 in that category, but it did. And so they're going to have it at Boston Children's Hospital on the epilepsy unit for the kids, which is very exciting. So it's not just for kids with disabilities. Really, all kids can read it and feel empowered by it. But I wrote it specifically for kids with disabilities because I came across a study that said there really aren't a lot of books on the market for kids who have disabilities, and having a grandchild who was diagnosed with Dravet syndrome really lit a fire under me to write one.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. I mean, honestly, like the way you describe the book, it it makes me want to read it. I mean, you know how you described it. Yeah, no, I mean, I'll definitely like you say it's on Amazon, so maybe I'll just order one and give it a read because, I love like how you said Percy Jackson, Harry Potter. I mean, I love those books. So, I mean, it honestly sounds like really, really interesting and really cool. And just like the storytelling of like the door in her mind and in the real world, so it does sound really interesting. So I'll definitely give it a read.
Thank
Um, yeah, of course. What got you into writing to start? Like, was it something that you found early on in life or something later on in life? Like, how did writing become a part of you?
I think I've been writing for a long time, not professionally, but more, it's more cathartic for me. So I remember, I think what happened was years ago, my daughter graduated high school and she came across some of my writing, and there's a lot that I did not share with my children about my past. And she happened to see a book in a garage that I had penned. I wrote down some like journal notes, and it upset her. I think she might have even cried. I'm not sure, but she said you should be writing a book, and so that kind of sparked the idea of me eventually writing a book. About a year ago, I did take a class to try to figure out like where I needed to get some improvement as a writer, because if I'm going to release something, I wanted it to be very strong. And then when I was taking that class, I was actually writing a book about a psych nurse. It was an adult book, thriller, about a psych nurse who, and my idea was kind of like, what if the person who takes care of the mentally ill patients is the most mentally ill of all, kind of thing. So that was kind of the premise of that book. But as I was writing the book, I came across that study about there not being enough books in children's literature for kids with disabilities. So I kind of set that book aside. And so I do have like, I don't know, 10,000 words of the adult book written. And I started revisiting that now that Delilah versus the Ghastly Grim is out. But that really is kind of where it started. I think it was more personal. It was more like a cathartic thing that I was doing. And then eventually it became something where I'm sharing it now with others.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It was really cool, like how your daughter kind of pushed you to release this stuff because I feel like as artists, sometimes we're really scared about releasing our stuff and we're worried like are other people going to like it? Like what if they don't? What do I do then? And we kind of have all these questions going around in our mind, but it's always important to, share it at first with like our family and friends. And if they give you that support, like, yeah, this is great. You should, write a book. You should make a film, draw a painting, whatever that art may be. I feel like it's important to get that support to help us push through those sort of negative thoughts we have in our minds and to just share it with people, and people will love it, people may not love it, that's part of the world of being an artist. You can't please everyone, not everything is perfect, that's just who we are, showing our art to the world. But we do it because we're very passionate about it, and it could be just from like a personal experience, or we just love to be creative. So it's really awesome that you're still continuing to write, and I do hope, wish you the best of luck on this adult novel that you're working on. It does seem really interesting as well. I want to get back to the Delilah versus the Ghastly Grim, and I know you mentioned that your granddaughter was living with this the Dravet Syndrome, and I was curious to know, like, how did your granddaughter's journey help shape the character of Delilah?
Oh, it shaped it a huge amount. So I quite often say it's not my book, it's her book. She's not old enough to read the book yet. So she's not really familiar with the actual story of it. She knows a book was written about her and she'll point to the cover and she'll say, "That's me," because I made the character on the cover look like what I imagine she's going to look like, because she has the dark hair. She even has the streak in her hair she was born with. So I wanted all that to kind of mirror what she looks like. So she's familiar with that, but she's only 4 years old. So she's, you know, the book isn't like exactly like Delilah because she's too young right now. However, a lot of the book is mirrored off my experiences with Delilah. So in my mind, I knew I wanted to have some Christian elements in the book. So for example, I was taking a walk one day and I was like, well, what do I want to include? I want to include something like maybe the Sanhedrin scene. So there's going to be a scene in there where I want her to like be, you know, questioned and kind of thing. And then my daughter sent me a picture of my grandchild holding a baby kangaroo. And I was like, okay, so she's going to face the Kangaroo Council in this fantasy realm, because I actually spoke to an award-winning, best-selling children's writer who advised me to, like, for fantasy stories, kids really like some hybrid characters and stuff like that. So I said, okay, I'll include some of those in there. That's a really good idea. And so I kind of got the idea for it to be kangaroos because of a picture with my grandchild. Or she'll do something where we were doing flashcards one day because we're working on her speech. And because with Dravet, these kids need speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy. A lot of the kids need these things. So she goes to that every week. So we were doing flashcards to work on her speech, and we came across a card with a snake. And she usually, when she says something, she'll hold the card, and she refused to hold the card. She's like, no, I don't like the snake. I don't want the snake. Get the card away from me, kind of thing. And I was like, so I knew I was going to infuse a monster being snake-like in there because of Delilah. So I always say it's not my book, it's her book. It's basically everything that I experienced with her at that particular time just got weaved right into the book and the storyline. So she is a huge part of the book. A lot of what is in the book is things that were going on at that particular time with Delilah.
Yeah. That's amazing. Just like how, you know, how you say it's not my book, it's her book, and just taking those real life experiences and putting them into this book is really cool. Like how you said a picture of her holding a kangaroo inspired this whole Kangaroo Council, and the fear of snakes had this snake-like monster in the book. So it's really cool. And I mean, I do hope she gets the chance to read this book, because I'm sure she'll notice like all those little things in it as well. Yeah, that's really cool. Like, you know, and as artists, you know, like it's the people around us that helps inspire the stuff that we create, you know. It's like not just the support that we get from our family and friends, but also, like you said, those real life experiences we've had, you know, whether it's like a night out on the town and, you know, or we see something and we're like, that'd be really cool to incorporate something, if it's in a book or in a film or a painting, you know. It's really cool. Just like the little things that we see can create this like amazing piece of art where other people can see it and, you know, not, you know, give a second look at it. You know, they just kind of see it as whatever. But as artists, you know, we can see like a whole new world of this thing, you know, like this whole new vision. And it's really cool how you created this sort of fantasy world based off of the real life experiences of your granddaughter. So again, it does sound really, really interesting and a really awesome book. So I do want to get a chance to read it.
I think you're right about that. Like if you look at think about some of the artists that have produced some beautiful work, even if they took something like a normal, regular person who maybe isn't an artist, will look at something and see maybe the whole picture. But then another artist, like say you're outside, I don't know if you've ever seen those photographs where it's more like a microscopic piece of a leaf, and that is what's like beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. So it's kind of like you are paying attention to these details that that get overlooked on a daily basis, but yet when you infuse them into art or in writing, it adds authenticity to the work that I think if you don't have there, you're not going to connect as well with your audience members.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's the little things that count, you know. It's those little details that, you know, people may not see, but then when you display it in an art form, it's like, oh wow, I never knew about that, or I never experienced that. So thank you for sharing that, So it's just really cool how we as artists can help change that sort of perspective of audience members to look at something so like vastly different, that they have never seen before or never thought of before. So it's really cool that we kind of have the power to do that. Um, I do want to talk about, because you mentioned that you're the founder of the Blue Round Book Group LLC. So what challenges did you face when launching a publishing company?
So it's not actually difficult to launch your own publishing company. It's some forms that you have to fill out and a fee that you have to pay. What is difficult is making sure that the work meets professional standards. I think that is often a mistake that is occurring when people self-publish books or open their own publishing company to publish their books. For Delilah versus the Ghastly Grimm, I did about 30 edits on my own and then 2 professional edits. One edit was done by an award-winning former literary agent, Aaron Young, and then another edit was done by the actual editor of The Hunger Games, edited Delilah versus the Ghastly Grimm. So I had 2 professional edits done. And then I also, even though I can produce artwork, and like I have artwork in my house and my family members and friends all have my artwork. I've had artwork in movies. Even though I can do artwork, I didn't feel like it was going to reach the level that would be appropriate to put on the cover of a book. So I contracted with an illustrator to do that. So I think that was the harder part. Like, you have to make sure that the work you produce, whether it's the illustrations, the design, because illustrations and the design are not the same thing, the design of the book, all the features that go into the book, there's way more than most people realize. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So that was a learning curve for me. And then marketing. Marketing is hard. It is hard. I am still learning that part of it. So, we were fortunate where we were able to get some influencers on board, and we've had some commercials go up. For the book itself, I wanted it to be human made, like no AI. I was very specific about, Grammarly's fine for the grammar, but it's human written, it's the cover's human and everything like that. But for marketing, I felt like AI is okay to use. So because you can't, for me, I'm a psych nurse, so I can't afford to hire big studios to do like animated things. And this is a young person's book. So we use AI to do some of the animations and stuff like that for the promos. And so we have some commercials that are up on like streaming services and stuff like that. So I had to learn how to do all that. And there's a big learning curve there. It takes a lot of time, a lot of hours, takes money to invest in it. So that, I would say, those are some of the obstacles that I face, and we're still kind of learning as we go. We're doing well, but it's very hard to compete with the big 5 publishers who have whole departments dedicated to handling each of these aspects, and when you're doing it on your own.
Yeah, I bet. But because I feel like since we love it so much, we're willing to do the work and to market it ourselves, and to even use AI to help us. I remember in a previous episode, I was talking with someone and we were discussing about the pros and cons of AI, and it's such a powerful tool, but at the same time, if you abuse it so much, it's not like human anymore, and I feel like if we can just sort of use it just to help out, like how you said with animations and stuff, like it's fine if like the original product itself was human made, so it does add to the story as opposed to just being this sort of just computer generated thing from a computer, like it came from an original source, so I feel like it's important to sort of handle like that power of AI, because like I said, it's just such a powerful tool, and I mean, if you don't use it correctly, you can have like this totally different outcome, where it's not even human anymore. So, but it is really
the truth is, though, this, like that the world is changing, and if you don't get on board, you will get left behind. There's no stopping the train. The train is running full blast. I do firmly believe that there has to be the human element. When I was searching for the illustrator, I I was extremely clear. Absolutely no AI. Absolutely no AI for the cover. And the artist who I ended up working with, Michael Deschaux, he said, "I'm so glad that you said that, because this is AI is all over the place right now, and a lot of people are just using AI for the cover." I did not want to go that route, but I don't have like, for each person has to make their own decision, and some of those decisions are budgetary. It's expensive to hire somebody to do it. And realistically, you might have a good story, but won't be able to put out a quality product because you can't afford to hire somebody. You're going to do what you have to do. So I'm not opposed to people making decisions for reasons like that. Having said as much, I do think you're right. I think that AI cannot match human creativity. It cannot match the emotional elements that go in there. We'll lose some of the vulnerability that makes artwork and writing beautiful. So I don't think that AI can like write a book, do the cover, do all that. I don't think it can do it at the level of a human. However, when it comes to marketing, based on my research, a lot of these companies are turning to AI. So they are recognizing that it's cost effective, and marketing is an area that AI can, I think, be helpful. But I can usually spot AI marketing versus a human marketing design. There are giveaways there in the style of the writing. I can spot it. And in the illustrations, you can usually pick out what's AI because of like it sometimes misses like on the hands and the eyes. So, there are things you can spot to tell the difference. I think the problem is that the cost is such a barrier to some people who would prefer the work to go to humans, that they're kind of forced into the position where it's either I turn to AI for help, or I'm not going to be able to produce work that nobody's going to look at it if, I do it myself because I can't draw, So I think that's where we're going to see more and more turning to AI. And once it continues to go that route and people recognize that it's so cost effective, it's going to start bleeding over to the bigger companies doing the same thing, because they're not going to pay more for what could be done for less. So I think at this point, you have to look at it as like, how can we use it as a tool without it taking over what should be done by humans?
Yeah, exactly. Because, yeah, at the end of the day, it is just a tool, and how we use it can have such a big impact on the work, where it shows like it was done by a human versus when it was just completely done by a computer. So, yeah, so thank you for sharing that. Um, I am curious to know, getting back to the book Delilah, versus the Ghastly Grimm, like what impact does disability representation have on young readers? Like, what has it on the book, and how you wanted to express disability representation in books?
So disability representation is important to me in my of course, because of Delilah and the fact that she was diagnosed with a pretty severe disorder. So my problem with the situation right now is the gatekeepers don't release enough books for kids with disabilities. And most likely that's either because it didn't make enough money. And in my opinion, a lot of times it didn't make enough money because the books that were released were books that, say, weren't portraying these kids authentically, or maybe it was that they cured the disorder rather than empowered the child, which is annoying, because that just makes the child feel more separated, and parents aren't going to be happy about that. Like, hey, this was supposed to be for my child to, make them feel empowered. And instead it did the opposite, because it's saying, oh, well, this kid needed to be cured, wasn't good enough the way he or she was. So that is a problem. And then some of the ones that came out were just so educational that kids didn't gravitate towards those books. And, I like educational books, but you also have to pay attention to who you're writing the book for. So it's created an issue where there aren't a lot of books where kids with disabilities can kind of see themselves in the stories that they read, to see themselves like the heroes in the stories that they read. And so I think it's important to produce at least some more books out there, kind of bridge that gap so that kids with disabilities can feel like, hey, that character's like me. I can go on an adventure. I can go on a quest. I can have this exciting experience. And that's what I want really the kids to take away from this book. I want them to feel empowered by the book, not separated by it.
Yeah. No, that's really good because representation is important, and to see yourself on like in a book or on a film or something like that, to say like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it too. So, and it's really important for people like that to see that, as opposed to, like you said, just, oh, they just cured them, or they, just did this thing and then it was over with, so just to empower them, to make them feel like they're not alone is very important. And it goes beyond just disability representation. There's also like people like, like for me, for instance, being Latino, and, there wasn't like a lot of people like me like on screen at first, and then it took some time, to have like a bunch of amazing directors and writers. And, now we're starting to see more Latino directors and writers and, and films, like people behind the scenes doing that. So I feel like there's a lot of representation out there that maybe aren't getting that much presence in a book or on screen. So I feel like it is very important for people to not, or to feel included, to have that presence of being like, if they can do it, I can do it, and give them that motivation to, if they want to be an artist as well, if they see someone like them making a film, writing a book, drawing a painting, it'll give them that inspiration to, I can do that as well. And then from there, if it's really well received, they, then they kind of go forward and start, going, building up upward trajectory and hiring more people like them, so it's just like this whole like cool domino effect that could happen when you do something that impacts them positively. It can go in a positive direction. So I do feel like it's important.
It's funny you say that, because when I talk about like my goal for Blue Round Book Group, I do say I'm hoping for it to have a focus on inclusion and better representation, because I think both areas, even though we've made progress, I think both areas are still problematic. And I think that there does need to be more out there so that people can see themselves, like little kids. I think about the little kids who say like, back when I was young, all the dolls were white. All the Barbie dolls were white. And then what about the African American kids? They had to play with the white Barbie dolls. There weren't any like African American dolls. So you know what I mean? Like, and now today you'll see more choices when you go to the stores, and there should be, because we are different, and it helps the children feel like, oh, I could be like her, or I could have a toy like me out there. They shouldn't feel like separated negatively. And I feel like that's the problem right now. There just isn't enough in movies. There isn't enough in books. There's not enough out there for proper representation and inclusion. And so that's an area that we still need to continue to work on to make improvements.
Yeah. It's still like, like you said, it still needs to be improved. And I feel like there is a point where hopefully it'll get better and better over time. So I do want to start to wrap up. Is there any like final advice or any tips that you want to share to any up and coming artists that could be listening to this podcast right now?
Absolutely. I feel like everyone has a good story in them. Everybody has a good story in them. And I think a lot of people are hesitant to share their stories because, as you were talking about, it can be almost scary to share your story. It does. There's some vulnerability with releasing your work to the world. But everybody has that story in them. And so just try, write it down. And if you want it for just yourself, that's fine. But maybe you could make a difference in somebody else's life. Maybe you could make a connection that would be meaningful to somebody else. Even if I only sell a handful of books and it made a difference to one child, I know that I made that difference. And you can possibly do that too. So if you do feel like that's something you want to do, don't let naysayers, because there are naysayers out there, stop you from doing it. It takes about, if you wrote like 3 pages a day, you could be done with your first draft in 4 months. It's not as long as you think. And then, then the real work comes in the edits. But, write your story, share it with others, see if it's something you might want to do. Most people don't get rich off writing. Most writers still have day jobs, but you could still make a difference in people's lives through your thoughts and sharing it. And there are different ways to do art too. Like you could do podcasts, you could do physical art, you could make movies. There are things you can do to share what you want to share creatively with others, rather than letting people decide for you, because I feel like the world will decide for you if you don't want to if you don't make the decisions for yourself. So I will say, try it, see if it's something that works with you. And if you do write something that's inclusive or has better representation, give me a call on that www.blueroundbookgroup, so you could reach me online there, and then maybe we can have a chat.
Yeah, definitely. And I would definitely be sure to share like your links of like your website and the book, of course, because I'm sure people listening in would also love to read it, self included. I'd love to read it and just to see some of the other work that you've done and all the accolades you have. But yeah, definitely I would love to see that and to have other people come in and learn more about you. So, but thank you again, T.L. McCoy, for being on the show. I had a really nice chat with you, and I do wish you the best of luck in your writing career.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Troubled Artists podcast. Have a great day.